Hey, I'm Anthony Shim, and you're listening to contrazoompod.
This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Rachel Ho. All right, everyone, hold on to your butts. For the first time ever, I am flying solo in an episode, so I apologize in advance in case this is super awkward, and also for any misreadings and line stumblings that are surely about to happen. So we're officially in the thick of TIFF 22. I'm on the ground in Toronto right now, and watching as many movies as I possibly can in 10 days. And by the time you're hearing this, I'm probably really hopped up on some caffeine, just wandering around King Street really dazed. And probably confused as well. I'm probably dazed and confused on King Street. This is our second episode in what I'm calling the TIFF 22 trilogy. The TIFF 22 contrazoompod trilogy. That's what I'm going with. A couple weeks ago, Dakota and I went through our most anticipated films in a TIFF preview episode, and next week we're going to have a wrap-up episode with a new guest and a fellow writer, Prabjot Bains, and we're going to be talking about some of the movies that we watched and just our general experiences at the festival this year. But for this week's episode, I did a couple interviews with two directors ahead of the festival. The first one is a Korean-Canadian director from Vancouver. His name is Anthony Shim, and he's at TIFF this year with his second feature film, Riceboy Sleeps. It's having its world premiere at the festival as part of the Platform and TIFF Next Wave Selects programs. The movie is set in the 90s, and it follows a Korean single mother as she raises her young son in the suburbs of Canada, determined to provide a better life for him than the one that she left behind. This movie genuinely hurt my heart in the best possible way a movie could hurt your heart. There is some moments of it's really heartwarming, and there's great laughs as well. But yeah, at the bottom of it, it's a really beautiful story about a mother and a son and how they're navigating life in a new country, and kind of the divide that happens for all of us when we're growing up with our parents. But it's a bit exasperated by a bit of a cultural roadblock as well. And there are some really, really great performances. As you're going to hear in the interview, two of the three main leads, it's their first acting job, which I found absolutely incredible, because they're all really, really great and just really well cast. And Anthony and I get into that a little bit as you're about to hear. So I love this movie a lot, and I'd recommend it to everyone. So before I keep going, here's me and Anthony chatting about the movie.
마이클 조던.
마이클 조던은 안 돼.
왜 안 되는데?
데이빗은 어때? 데이빗 좋은 이름 같지 않아?
싫어. 난 마이클 조던 할래.
왜 저래? 다른 이름 골라봐.
말했잖아. 마이클 조던.
안 돼. 다른 거 골라.
다른 거 싫어. 마이클 조던 할래.
그래, 그러면 마이클 킴해. 뭐 아니면 조던 킴 하던가. 근데
싫어. 마이클 조던 한다고. 마이클 조던.
그만!
All right, so Anthony, you are going to Toronto in a few days, really. Like, you're going to Toronto in a few days.
Tomorrow.
So how does that feel? Your first movie was premiered at the Vancouver Film Festival, and now you're going to the Toronto Film Festival. So you're like collecting Canadian film festivals is basically what you're doing.
I'm slowly working my way away from home. And yeah, no, we are. I'm leaving for Toronto tomorrow. And yeah, I've been looking forward to this time for a while now. Finally finally sharing this film with an audience, and in a theater too, not just through screeners.
I actually wish that I'd seen it in theaters. I watched it through a screener, because some of the imagery it's beautiful, especially when you get to Korea. It looks amazing, and it's going to look incredible on a screen. I think it's going to look really, really great.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it on a bigger screen, not as big as what the the Lightbox is going to have, but I have seen it on a bigger screen. I'm like, damn, that does make a big difference.
It does. It
Than to
really
see it
does.
on your laptop. Um, and so anyone who is wanting to see the film, please go see it in the theaters, because I think it does really help with the experience, the emotional impact of the story. So
Definitely. So I know COVID blocked for a lot of people, or not blocked, it just messed up people's timing. So when did you actually start making Rice Boy Sleeps?
well, actually, I was so lucky when it comes to the timing of things. I'm not sure if there could have been a better timing of making this film during a pandemic,
Yeah.
in that, I started writing this thing November 2019. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was like I started writing, and I was, I kind of set my life up so that I could just be alone indoors with my computer. Um, and then this pandemic happened, and life as we knew it changed drastically overnight, and but it didn't really change for me. And it actually, if there was one good thing about COVID, it was, for me at least, that it just gave me so much time to write and work on this thing, and because I couldn't, indulge in any of the other, the fun activities that I might be, doing, had there not been a pandemic. So I just, worked on this a lot, and then we managed to get financing and everything together pretty quickly, and we went to camera in the summer of 2021. And at that point, we had just gotten to that point, at least in BC, where you didn't have to test everybody on set 3 times a
Okay.
week, because, and PCR tests as well.
Mhm.
I mean, we just couldn't have afforded it. I mean, that would have just eaten up a huge chunk of our budget. And we were, things were tight for us as it was. So we were so lucky where we just found that little pocket of time where we didn't have to test. Um, COVID cases were going up again, but it wasn't as bad as it got later on, and things in Korea had gotten better at the time, so that we were able to actually all take our gear and fly to Korea and shoot during a pandemic, and we didn't have to quarantine.
Oh, that's
We
good.
got quarantine exemptions, and that had just recently been in effect. So, and that too, I mean, at the time, to go through a 2-week quarantine, for our cast and crew, that's a substantial amount of money and time,
Mhm.
neither of which we could afford. So, I mean, we couldn't have gotten luckier with the timing, because one of so many things could have happened where it just completely derailed us. Um, but we just managed to squeak by every, obstacle that came our way, and now that we're finally premiering, we're allowed to be in theaters again. We're allowed to have events and parties and get-togethers, and fly to this place and that place without having to quarantine or take a gazillion COVID tests.
It's true. Yeah, I didn't think of it. Like you kind of knocked on exactly the right timing for everything. All right, we talked a bit very briefly about the film kind of opening up on screen and looking just really gorgeous. Like it genuinely is. I don't think normally we don't it sounds kind of weird to say, but it's like I don't think we normally look to dramas almost to give you those really beautiful, beautiful landscapes. Not in a story like this. Like I'm not expecting to be blown away by the imagery. I'm more expecting to be blown away by the story. And then the fact that yourself, your DP, Christopher Liu, and your composer as well, Andrew Young Hoon Lee, the three of you guys created an incredibly atmospheric film, like from obviously from your direction, but then the music is beautiful, by the way. It's incredible. And then, like we said, the actual cinematography of it. So when you guys are coming together, what were some of the influences, some of the touch points that you guys wanted to bring into the film, and how did you decide what direction you wanted, like, the energy of the film to go into?
Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed those specific aspects of the film, um, because I knew really, really early on, um, as I was writing the script, I knew that those two key positions were going to be um, so essential in this film working and in
Mm-hmm.
having the emotional impact that I was hoping to have on audiences. And so I reached out to Chris and Andrew. Neither of who I didn't know either of them prior to this. We had mutual acquaintances, um, but I didn't know them. But I was familiar with their work, and I thought I was a huge fan, and I thought what they do would be what they could bring to the table was perfect for what I was imagining in my head. And so, I reached out. They were the first two people I reached out to, and we discussed a lot of things, and we wanted to make sure that we saw and imagined this film in a similar way. And to start, I'll start with Chris and the visual portion of the film. You know, we really had to agree on specifically the camera's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Through whose POV are we experiencing this film from? Um, and in various different ways of explaining it, we ultimately came to this place where we described it as, you know, the camera representing the eyes of the deceased father.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really an important piece of information for the audience to have when they're watching the film, but for us we needed to make a specific decision. And whenever we got into a place where we just didn't know, like, where are we shooting this from, why is the camera moving, and should it be moving, we wanted to always refer back to that, of from the beginning to the end it is being told from that perspective, and so that we start in Korea and we end in Korea from that perspective. And that really informed us at every step of the way of the camera's movements. When and how do we cut? uh, why does the camera move? Why does the camera linger on a person's face at certain times? um, and we agreed on that pretty quickly, and we came to that. We had these ideas separately as well, which was a really good sign. And then from there we start to build on to it. And, we discussed a lot of different film references. We both had similar ideas of, filmmakers and films in mind that we thought would be good go-to references for us. Um, and then it was, yeah, it's like as we were shooting, we were figuring it out. Like theoretically we understood what we were doing on paper it made sense, but then for us to actually get out there with this film camera and to on a gimbal and to actually execute these moves, it took us a little bit to really figure out. But after a little while, and we started seeing the dailies, and we shot on film, so we weren't seeing the dailies for we didn't see the first batch of dailies till the weekend after the first week of shooting. So
Mm-hmm.
once we started to see it, then we went, okay, like, this is working. We could start to identify, what scenes and what moves were working and what wasn't and why. Um, and that was enough for us to, feel confident to keep going and to really lean into it. Um, and then, that pair, knowing that that's where we were coming with, we had very similar conversations when it came to the music side of it. Um, like talking about the perspective of it, and um, the the feeling, the purpose of the music, and that the goal of the music in this wasn't to manipulate audiences to feeling certain emotions, but that it helps really just complete the world on an audio sense as well. Um, and I told, when I talked to Andrew from early on, I told him, I said, like I had listened to so much of his work, and I was listening to his previous um, musical works while I was writing, and then while I was building a pitch deck, and while I was doing research, and so in my mind, his music and this world were synonymous already. And so I told Andrew, I said, you know what, honestly, if you just gave us the stuff you've already recorded, I can make that work in this world perfectly. Like it works. Like you don't have to do anything outside of like what you just do well already. And of course, Andrew has you, in the best of ways has so much pride in his work, and so much like takes such a strong responsibility of what he creates, and artistic integrity, um, that he wanted to create something entirely original and new, specifically for this story in this world. Which I said, hell yeah, like I can't wait to hear this stuff. And it was amazing. We talked so much early on, um, and not necessarily about movies, but we talked about our own, connection to our Korean heritage, our upbringing, our thoughts and opinions about child relationships, our relationships with our language, our name, our culture, um, and we discussed so many things on a deep personal level, um, in that and it felt like we really got to know each other on a certain level that was really unique and special. That by the time that he actually started making the music, he would send stuff over, and I would just take it and I would just plop it in, and it would just work. And we didn't, and there was no back and forth of, hey, can you try this? Can you try that? Can you change this? No, it was just like, thank you. Here you
Cut and
go.
paste.
Like it's just plop them in, and that's the movie. Like it was so effortless and seamless in a way, when it came to that actual creative part of it, because he was just so in touch with this story, these characters, this world, and my sensibilities, and where I was coming from, and what I was hoping to achieve. Um, you know, it was, yeah, it was. I mean, both of them. When we actually got to shooting, it was so collaborative and it was so creative, and I trusted Chris 1000%. Um, and sometimes like I didn't even need to be consulted. I just knew, like, whatever you think would work for this, like I just know it will work, because um, the I feel like if we did anything right, we did the prep really well. Um,
It really comes together really nicely. That what you said about, the camera being from the POV of the father, that adds a really, I know you said it doesn't matter to the audience, and in a sense it doesn't, like it doesn't, but that adds like a really interesting layer and texture, especially on a rewatch, which I will be rewatching from that screener link, and I think I am going to try to find time at Toronto to watch it in theater.
Please.
But it adds like another level of just I suppose affecting and like meaning to it. That's incredible. But what you said about Andrew's music, I loved it. Like the score was just, to me, so overwhelming at times, and I loved how each bit comes together. So it's nice to hear that you guys are so collaborative with one another, because it shows, in my opinion. Like I think that everything kind of comes together in a really beautiful way, and that it's clear you all had a very good understanding with one another about what the movie was going to be about and what it meant, to each of you individually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so I think that that's really cool. So going along with the people who helped you make this movie, your actors are incredible, and especially the two young kids, the two boys. They're like, it's amazing. They're absolutely amazing, and especially so. Apologies if I don't pronounce his name properly, but you have Doohyun Noel Wang and then
Yeah,
Ethan Wang.
he just goes by Noel. Yeah.
Does he just go by Noel?
Yeah.
I have another friend who's, I shouldn't say his name on this, but I have a friend whose name, that's actually his name, but we call him by his last name. But they're both, they both were amazing as young David and teenage David. And
Yeah.
how did you find these guys? They're both Vancouver based, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
Oh, no. Sorry. One was from Toronto, wasn't it?
Edith's from Toronto.
Right. But how did you find these guys?
Not easily.
Oh.
When we first put out the audition submissions, we started close. We started local, and then we started to kind of work our way out. Just because for financial reasons, it's always better to cast local. So we tried to see if there was, that. I mean, I've been a part of the Vancouver acting scene for a long time, so I know a lot of actors, and I knew I didn't personally know of any, but we thought maybe there's a diamond in the rough that I'm not aware of, and we couldn't, I couldn't find anyone that was quite right. And the biggest thing was nothing to do with these young actors' acting skills, but it had to do with the language. It had to do with, for the little one, he had to be able to speak Korean fluently but struggle with English. And then for teenage Donghyun, he had to be completely fluent in English and have a real, struggle with speaking Korean. And I wanted to have it be natural as well. And so that was the biggest thing. That pretty much just, that was a thing that eliminated a lot of the potential candidates. And so we had a hard time. And then I put out an ad in the Korean newspaper.
Yeah.
We made this, this like ad, just saying like, making a movie about, Korean immigrants and, directed by Anthony Shim. And we're looking for a boy this age range, no experience needed, that kind of stuff. Please contact this email address and send us your name and headshot, whatever. And we did that. And then I looked at so many young kids, and I started looking everywhere else. And then we get these tapes one day, and like, they're well shot, but they're kind of like a commercial short film, like PSA maybe. Like I'm not sure exactly what they are, because it didn't have like opening, like didn't have like a title and like in credits and stuff for a short film. But it wasn't necessarily like advertising anything, so it wasn't a commercial. But I was like, I just like, and it would have this like loose sort of storyline to it, and I got like 3 of them of this boy, and I thought, did this boy make these short films for this audition? But nonetheless, it was Noel, and he was perfect, and just, fate would have it, his dad recently decided to pursue filmmaking. And so had gone to film school and was making these videos, these short film type things using his son. And so like there was all this kind of evidence of his son being natural and, really being great in front of the camera. And so then we took those and we just went like, oh, this is our guy. Like, where is he from? Like, we have no information about him. And he turned out to, live 30 minutes from where we're shooting. So that worked out just beautifully. And he's just like, you don't find kids like that every day. He was such a pro and such a joy to work with. And that could have gone disastrously, that role. because you just don't know how kids are going to react to stress or fatigue or pressure. But he was amazing. And then I was having a hard time finding the teenage boy, and then I reached out to an actor friend of mine in Toronto and just said, who's also Korean, and I said, do you know anyone in Toronto that you could recommend? And he knew someone from the church, which the reverend there was also the reverend of the church I grew up going to in Victoria, BC.
Oh wow!
So it was just a crazy coincidence. And then he sent me a picture of Ethan, and I went, "That's a guy." I don't know what he sounds like. I don't know how he acts, but that face, that look, like that is our boy. And I was right.
Ethan fits into the 90s really well too, I have to say. Like he
Yeah.
fit that the mushroom cut, the bleach
Yeah.
tip, like he fit it really, really well. Which
Yeah.
I thought was funny because I'm like, he just reminds me of every Asian boy I grew up with. Like he just reminds me of that. It's great.
Yeah.
And then what about Choi Sung Yoon? You got her. She's actually from Korea, and I saw that she
Yes.
was a dancer. Like she originally trained
Yes.
to be a ballet dancer, which
Yes.
made so much sense to me because I felt like the whole time I was watching her, she has like a way of carrying herself, and like the way she moves across the screen, she's very like graceful. She is like a
Yes.
dancer, and so it didn't really surprise me that she had a dancing background.
She moves with grace and integrity,
Yes,
which
absolutely.
was such an essential part of this role. That although she is a working class immigrant woman who is working in these rough conditions and is dealing with a lot of emotional hardships, but that when we see her walk across that screen, that she walks with her head held up high, and she walks with integrity. That was so important, and um, it's just amazing that we found something like her. And that was also not easy. There was a brief time that I thought we might not make this film because I didn't feel like there was the right person for this role. And I mean, for all three roles, but in particular with the role of So Young, if that part wasn't cast right, like this film just wouldn't work, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, we put out a search across North America. I feel like I've seen the tapes of every Asian female actress across North America between the ages of 15 to 50. And once again, the language thing.
Yeah.
That was really tough. And then I came to Korea for location scouting, and I started meeting with actors and um, inquiring about actresses here. And same thing here. The language was an issue. Um, Someone who could speak English just well enough that they could, they could connect their voice to their emotional life, but
Mm-hmm.
still have an accent and all of those things. And we finally decided to work with a casting director in Korea, and she knew that I just wasn't happy with a lot of the actors that we were looking at, and not because they were bad, they just didn't fit that specific mold that I felt was so important. And then she goes, "I've got this, it's a crazy idea, but just give it a shot. There's this person I know. She's a dancer. She's never acted before, but I've watched her in this documentary about dancers that she made. And there's just something about her."
Oh.
And the casting director said, "If I had to put anyone at the top of the list, it would be her." And I said, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" I've got two young boys, one who's never acted before, and another one with limited acting experience. And you want me to cast a lead with someone who's never been in a movie before or acted before? That's just, I'm just putting, flushing this movie down the toilet. That is insane. Just give it a go. Give it a shot. Have a look at these videos that she's in, and watch her work. And I did, and I thought, damn, she's right. Like, there is something about her that is just so charismatic, and intriguing, and there's a vulnerability about her, that I thought was so right. And so then she sent the tape, watched the tape, and that particular day I had watched 100 other tapes of that particular scene. It was so much so that I started to question whether it was my writing that was the problem. and then I see her, and I went, oh my God, I'm fucked. I'm gonna have to cast the lead with someone who's never acted before. And we met over Zoom, and she loves telling this story because she loves telling people about how I made her audition 4 times after her initial audition taping. It was because I needed to see her read these other scenes as well, and just with every read, I just went like, this is so good. Like, this is the movie. This is the character. And everyone who heard that I wanted to cast someone who had never acted before also thought I was out of my mind. But then I would show these Zoom recordings that I would do with her, and everyone thought the same thing. Like, this is so young. Like, and at the time, I knew so little about her personal life, and it was so convincing that I thought, I wonder if she grew up as an orphan, for real. Like, and I had to ask her, like, do you have children? Did you grow up somewhere else?
Awkward question. Are you?
Yeah, like, I'm afraid to ask about your relationship with your parents. But no, she grew up, with the wonderful family, and grew up in Seoul, and had a wonderful childhood being a ballerina. But it wasn't necessarily about her specific life experience, but it was more so about her her emotional capacity, and the way she experiences the world around her, that was so similar to So Young, that I thought, that's it. That's what matters.
One thing I enjoyed about her was, the first time that we see her in when David's like a little boy, and she speaks a little bit of English, and that is a more Korean accented English than we get when he's a teenager. And like, you can see the progression of her English, and like, I was like, that's how did she take English, like, to be an actress and to start trying to pretend that you don't speak a language without sounding like a cartoon. I think must be very difficult, and I think she pulled it off so nicely. And I love that just kind of passage of time that you see with her, like, just specifically her, is incredible. I can't believe that that's her first acting role. That's incredible. One part of the movie that I really thought was interesting, and I mean, it's a touch point with, I think, most East Asian cultures, but I know that other cultures have the same thing, which is you never ever discuss anything about hard times, any difficult times, nothing bad that's ever happened in your life. You just don't talk about it. That's and us as children, we know, don't even ask your parents, don't ask your grandparents about it. Forget it. It's off limits. But then there's kind of a funny thing where our generation that is being born and raised outside of Asia, and we're in the West, where they just can't stop talking about their emotions in the West and talking about how trauma and grief and all those things, like, it's never ending over here. So it's like the complete opposite. So for yourself, you've got a foot in both camps. Like, I read in the press kit, which, by the way, nicest press kit I've ever seen. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. And
it's a beautiful press kit.
And I have to give a shout out to our production designer, Louisa Birkin, who made that press kit.
So nice.
I said to her, Louisa, no one cares about what a press kit looks like.
Not true.
And well, maybe, as in like the audience is
Yeah, I
watching
know,
it.
yeah.
It doesn't make a difference in how well it does at the box office or how much we're able to sell it for. But I said, I find most press kits to be so boring,
Just, yeah.
and it just feels like reading a you know
It's a
you know
document. It's just it's a
like
Word doc
reading
that got
homework.
converted to a
Yeah,
PDF. That's it. That's
exactly.
all it is.
And
This
so
is
I said,
beautiful though.
I was like, we got to do this thing. I need to deliver a press kit. We might as well have some fun with it, and we might as well make it look pleasing to the eye, so that those who do have to look at it can have a good time.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
I can get it can get a sense of who we are as a team. So
It's
I'm
beautiful.
so glad you liked it.
It's honestly time and money well spent on that one. It's really, really great. But in your director's statement
Yes.
on there, you mentioned about being, you're neither Korean, you're neither Canadian, you're both. You're a hyphenate,
Yes.
like so many of us. We're lovely hyphenate people. And I love how you said that actually, like I'm a hyphenate. I'm like, I've never thought of it that way.
Hmm.
But when you've got your foot in both camps and you yourself being a writer, being a director, how does being on one end coming from a culture that says don't talk about bad stuff, don't talk about hard things, and then growing up in a culture that, like I said, just seemingly only wants to talk about how, you know, parents ruined our lives and blah blah
Hmm.
blah blah and all that kind of stuff. How does that influence you as a writer, and the kinds of stories that you want to tell?
So making this film, it actually gave me the opportunity to learn a lot about my own upbringing and my past and my family, um, because it kind of gave me an excuse slash permission to talk to my mom about a lot of things that we had never talked about, things about her past, things about our relationship over the years, um, and I and it was quite therapeutic and and wonderful. I think it brought us much closer, um, because you're right. We come from cultures where you don't talk about the past, you don't talk about the traumas of your people, of your own life. Um, it's about just you just keep marching on, um, and I think it's unfortunate because you know I lost two of my four grandparents during the making of this film, and there's so much about their past that I want to know and learn so much about because it helps inform who I am today. Um, it makes me feel more grounded and whole as a person. Um, but they were people of a generation where they just refused to talk about certain things, no matter how much I asked. Um, and I think my mom has made a real effort in not being that way, but being much more open and communicating and sharing with us. And then I make an effort to ask and to take interest in those things. Um, so I think the takeaway is, in Western culture, in Canadian culture, we do talk about all of these things and we do talk about our feelings. And I think it's great as long as it's not about indulging in it or feeling sorry for yourself. I think there's a way to investigate and to be curious about your past and about the things that are painful in a way that it's used to grow from, to learn from, and to heal from. And so I think if there's a way to kind of find that balance of these two cultures, of we can be a generation where we do talk, we do discuss, but it's all for the purposes of teaching and learning and growing, whether it be with our elders or with our next generation. Um, and in the films I make, I would love to do just that, but through the medium of filmmaking.
I think that's why I get really excited about like not just seeing Asian faces in Hollywood movies, like that's cool. Like I think that that's really neat, and obviously something that we need to have done because we didn't have it when we were growing up. But I get more excited about the idea of Asian Canadian, Asian American, whatever, um, directors and writers and things like that, because I just feel like because we come from such a repressed culture in many ways, it's kind of neat to see what we're going to be able to do as like a group of people, of just being able to put out art that, you know, our parents would never have dreamed of opening and being up that vulnerable about certain things in our lives. So I think that that's awesome, and then I commend you for doing that so well in this movie. Genuinely, I really
Thank
love
you.
this movie, and it made me cry and it made me laugh as well. Though there are some funny moments, I thought that there were some really cute funny moments that I enjoyed.
I tried. To me, originally, it set out to, I set out to write a comedy,
Oh,
and I started that in that direction, and it started to go another direction, and I had to commit to it. But I was like, but I gotta hold on to these, funny moments, to the lighter moments, because there were some real absurd moments of my upbringing, that have informed who I am today, and it would be a shame to not present it in its authentic form.
yeah.
Yeah.
I find it really fascinating, and I saw it the most, I think, with what was that show called? Fresh Off the Boat. Kind of the one that started like the whole thing off with like Asians in America.
Mm-hmm.
But the scene in the lunchroom, which you also have a similar type scene.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy that because I didn't realize that every single one of us went through the exact same thing. Like all of us basically
Yeah.
had that moment in the lunchroom where we opened our Tupperware containers and every other kid was like, "What is that?" You know, like, "What are you eating? Are those worms?" It's like, "No, they're just
Yeah.
noodles." And in
No, you
20
feel
years,
like,
you're going to love
yeah.
these things and you're going to spend $20 a bowl eating this. So be quiet.
Yes, the irony in that, it's just crazy to me that the
Yeah.
things that we were made fun of for eating, now the people who are making fun of us are now going to spend $20-$30 at some
Yeah.
shit ass restaurant in a hipster neighborhood, and
Yeah.
saying how much you love authentic Asian food.
Yeah. They're just
It's
like, "Wow,
great. It's
Asian at
great on one.
heart."
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
"Get out of
It's
here."
great on one hand, but at the same time, it's just like, motherfucker, I know you. You were the kid who was bullying the Asian kids for eating exactly that 20 years ago. But
Exactly.
anyways,
Yeah.
keep
I
eating
love that
Asian
we
food,
all
keep
had that
supporting.
experience, and
Yeah,
I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that we can all share in that, the fact that that happened.
it's
Um,
because it's amazing, because I thought, I think we all grow up thinking, oh, that was only me. I was the only one that experienced that. But then, since I wrote the script, from the time I've written the script, and everyone who's read it and now has seen the film, that's one of the most talked about things. It's just like, and it's not just Asian people.
yeah,
You know, it's
that's a
it's
weird thing.
it's Eastern European people who have said that
Yeah,
to me. It's Italian people who have said that to me.
yeah.
You know,
If it
and
wasn't a sandwich, if it wasn't some Wonder Bread bologna sandwich, then
yes,
it was weird, and it was weird that we were eating good food. And it's like, come on, you guys. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me,
of course,
and
thank you.
congratulations on this movie. I genuinely really loved it, and I can't wait for everybody else to be able to watch it at TIFF. And
Hmm.
I know you're going to do some of the other festival circuits. So, yeah,
Hmm.
best of luck with that, and congratulations.
Thank you, and maybe I'll see you in person while I'm in Toronto.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Anthony for taking the time to chat with me. Riceboy Sleeps is, of course, going to be in Toronto, but it's also going to be playing at the Vancouver International Film Festival, the Calgary International Film Festival, and I think one over on the Atlantic part of Canada as well. And also it will be playing over in Busan in Korea at that film festival too. So there's plenty of chances for a lot of different people out there to watch it if you're interested, and I would highly recommend it. Our next interview is with John Barker, a filmmaker from South Africa whose latest movie, The Umbrella Men, is having its international premiere at TIFF as part of the Contemporary World Cinema program. A comedic heist film, The Umbrella Men follows a ragtag bunch of musicians who are forced to rob a bank during the Cape Town Minstrel Carnival in an effort to save their nightclub. The movie dives into a lot about the Cape Malay community and culture, which previously I knew nothing about. And so I was really looking forward to speaking with John and learning more about it. And that I did in the interview. I really enjoyed talking with him about not just that aspect of it, but how the movie came about, what his influences were, and his perspective on the South African film industry, which I've oddly been very drawn to South African films in the last couple of years. Not oddly because it's weird that South Africa, just a bit random, and I haven't done it on purpose. It's just that I've seen great great movie descriptions, and they all end up being South African. So it was fun talking to John about that side of things. So anyways, here it is. It's my interview with John Barker.
Dit sou Gershwin Adams se 30ste jaar gewees het as leier van die umbrella.
Does this make us good, Dad?
How long are you staying, man?
I'm headed back now.
We're 2 weeks away from the carnival. Stay for that at least, man. We're an umbrella men, bruh.
No, Auntie Val. I don't want this. This is your place now.
That's what your father wanted. And I know he had good reason.
Jerome, let me take the Kuma Club off your hands. The black was soft, man. It's falling apart. You see, I want to revive it, make it shine.
How much does the club owe? About $1 million before taxes.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Congratulations, first of all. This film it's so much fun. I love South African films. It's kind of a random thing that I've recently, in the last few years, really been drawn to South African cinema. Not kind of purposely either. I just, every time I read a movie description, I'm like, oh, that sounds good. And then inevitably it's a South African director. It's great. So I read that this movie was 15 years in the making for you. So this process started a long, long time for you. So how does it feel not only to have it done and dusted, but how does it feel to be back at TIFF, where your first film also screened? I mean, that would have been, 16 years ago now, which is crazy.
Yeah. Time goes by. It's, Rachel, it's been, I literally had the idea to do this film on the back of Bunny Chow. So when Bunny Chow screened around America, everyone was kind of going, oh, well, we didn't know that South Africans had music festivals. And I was like, we have things, man. so I thought my next film, because I love the heist and caper genre, I wanted to write a caper film, but set it in a world that the international audience would kind of relate to, and that was the Minstrel Carnival, because it's been going for over 200 years. Very beautiful, but in the term, so for 15 years we've been trying to make this film, and I just, many times I actually thought, why am I doing this? Nobody cares. Every time I pitch this beautiful film, the filmmakers are always like, this is a fantastic film. How can nobody want to make this film? We even had Trevor Noah before the Daily Show. Trevor was playing the lead, right? He was based here in South African Joburg. So Trevor and I would speak, and even when I was going to New York to speak to Trevor, he had just got the Daily Show, and we were still speaking about the film, just with his involvement somehow, because but even then, South Africans still weren't like, okay, you've got Trevor, let's go, it's brilliant. They were still like, no, the story, it doesn't work. Like, am I going crazy? That's mad. So to have it in Toronto now, it just means, it's just so fantastic for all the crew and the cast we shot 10 years ago, we shot some scenes of the carnival. And to tell everybody and to show everybody that we actually, first of all, we made the film was amazing, everybody on set. It was a real beautiful atmosphere because people had been involved for so long. And then just to get into a big festival like Toronto is just the cherry on the cake. It's beautiful. So cool.
So hold on. So I want to ask about Trevor Noah again, but just go back. You filmed some of the shots in the film 10 years ago.
Yeah, we got into the atelier in Cannes. They liked the script. They put us in touch with a lot of producers. But to convey the music and the community, I felt like we needed to go and shoot to explain what it looks like, So we went and shot down there over 10 years ago. It's so funny, the guy who plays Mortimer, the guy gets picked up in prison. He at one stage was, when we shot 10 years ago, he was the baby in the film. He was supposed to be the youngster, and it was a guy. He was playing a guy, obviously he was playing a guy, but the girl, so his character's now changed from him to now Mila. So Mila, the girl with the dreadlocks, I adapted that role that he was playing because it was too many men in the film. So I adapted him changed him to a girl, and he became Mila. And he was playing young Yusuf, which is a Muslim name, which we can go into later. I had to change it too. But Keenan Arison then now is playing one of the main leads who gets picked up from prison. But because so much time has gone by, it's bizarre.
Wow. So about Trevor Noah, I want to know, has he seen the film? Have you been able to show it to him yet?
So David Kabuka is Dave Kabuka is the guy who was the lead in Bunny Chow.
Yeah.
And so him and Trevor worked together a lot here in South Africa. And when Trevor got the Daily Show, he took Dave with him. So him and Dave have been working together on Daily Show forever. Dave's now producing, and he's been one of the writers forever. So and they live together. So basically, through this entire process, Trevor hears about the Umbrella Men all the time. He's like, because I send Dave clips and posters, and Dave shows Trevor, and it's been a crazy working experience for years. In fact, Trevor said one day I went to the Daily Show, and he was like, well, I went to watch the show, and then I went backstage, and he was getting changed. We were going to go out somewhere. And as he was getting changed, there were all these executives from the Daily Show in the room, and he said, and I came and he said, this is John Barker. He's a filmmaker from South Africa. He's been trying to do the Umbrella Men for so long that if I was knocked over in the road and I was lying there dying, John would say, hey, Trevor, can you still do the Umbrella Men? It's like, that's how he introduced me to all these execs. I was like, hey, not that bad.
That's funny. I want to go into some of the aspects of the film that I found the most interesting, which was the South African culture, the touch points from there. But I do have a question about making a heist movie, generally speaking. Logically speaking, I think for me, I would think you would know what your ending is and then work your way backwards to the beginning. Is that how you wrote it along with, I think it was Philip Roberts you wrote it with? Is that how you guys structured it from the beginning, or sorry, from the end to the beginning? Or did you just kind of find your way through the other way?
I mean, I think I always had it that it was going to be a Robin Hood type film where they only stole what they needed.
Right.
Because I didn't want that to be a thing of like, oh, so whenever this community's in trouble, their backs to the wall, then they do something dodgy. You know what I mean? I didn't want to have that. But yeah, in general, it was basically the music was the inspiration, the music and the carnival and what it represents and what that community represents to South Africans. Right. And the idea was that these guys who would not be the A team or the B team or the C team, but would be like a D team of robbers, bank robbers, right? The comedy would come from there, and them stumbling through and not really knowing exactly what they were doing, that they would at the end of they would beat the man who's trying to take away their nightclub, and he's trying to, gentrify and make more money out of it. That he was robbing them of their livelihoods, that they would get one up on him by using their cultural, the things that are key to them in terms of the carnival. So painting the faces and wearing the uniforms, 30,000 minstrels wearing uniforms. I wanted them to be clever, to use the things that they loved in their community, to have one up on the man and to take down the bank by doing it. So that was always the idea. I guess we kind of meandered, and it changed a lot. As you know, like Yusuf became Miller, and so a lot changed. But in essence, it was about a group of guys who were necessarily bank robbers, but were passionate musicians and crazy enough to go, well, we've got backs to the wall, we have to rob this bank in order to preserve our culture. So it was a meandering thing for many years. Like the script has changed so many times, Rachel, over the 50 years. It's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, over 15 years, I feel like it's bound to happen that it will change a little bit here and there, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, the South African cultural touch points on it, I find really, really interesting. And I have to thank you for introducing me to different aspects of the country's history and the culture that I really had no idea about. So things like, the area of Bo-Kaap in general, the idea of the Cape Malay. When I kept hearing Malay, I thought, are they talking about like Malays from Malay? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I ended up down a real rabbit hole of just looking up things about Second New Year. Even, I kind of came across things about the Goma song, because I was like, I wonder where that word came from when you named the nightclub the Goma Club. And so I thank you for that, because it's been a very great education over the last few days of learning about that. Your other films, though, like your Wonder Boy is quite satirical in terms of the South African political climate. And Bunny Chow, obviously, that touches on a part of South African culture that clearly Americans thought, you don't have or you don't have music festivals. You guys don't do those things. But what made you want to focus on the Cape Malay, that culture, that community for this film?
Well, there's a lot of history about my parents took me to watch the minstrels perform when I was very young. I was about 7 years old, and I remember being so blown away by the music and the way they looked, and that it was South African, but it was it was amazing. It was fantastical to see these guys performing. And it was just something I didn't know was actually South African. And as time went by, I kept doing research and learning about the minstrels. And obviously it's in the South African news all the time that the people of Cape Town don't want the minstrels to perform. It's always a thing where they're too noisy and it's loud and it's in its faces and it's like we're sick of it. So they try, and every year they strip a little bit more of that carnival, which is something I felt like I really wanted to document. And also when my dad was a soccer coach, is a soccer coach, and he would take us we'd follow him around to Umlani and to KwaMashu and Durban, to all the black townships. He was coaching AmaZulu at the time, and then AmaZulu got into a final in Cape Town, and we drove down to Cape Town. And the first place he took me to was a place called District 6. District 6 was one of the oldest suburbs in Cape Town. And it was a very mixed suburb. It was all races, all different kind of races together. And the apartheid government hated that idea that there was this community or the suburb where, everyone would mix, and there was harmony. Because for them, that was the opposite of what apartheid was. They wanted to keep it all separate. Mm-hmm. And so they turned the suburb into an all-white suburb, and they chased out they made it official in the 70s. And they put people onto trucks, and they kicked them out of that beautiful bohemian, beautiful old, fantastic suburb. And when my dad took us down to Cape Town, the first place he took us to was District 6, and it looked like some apocalyptic film. That was because it's so terrible, because half the buildings were pulled down. There were still kids playing in the street, but the backdrop was these. It looks like somewhere in Germany or Europe that had been bombed during the Second World War. So I always wanted to make a film about this community that went through all of this, and that yet still we're so upbeat about their community and about their roots, that it was very important to try and make that kind of film. But also I used comedy in a way to highlight points about gentrification, about the fact that the ongoing discussion in that community is that, and the community is very split, in that some feel that it's a colonial thing that everyone dresses in minstrels with the blackface idea turned into whiteface. And so some of the younger people in the community are not sure that they want to hang on to this as part of their culture. And then the other half are like, no, this is what we've gone through when we were emancipated in the 1840s. We took to the streets. This is part of our culture. It's part of our heritage, and we must embrace it. So that's also touched in the film. But it's just a fascinating community, and I really wanted to always make a film based in that community.
So going off that answer, when you're trying to find that balance between showing off the cultural aspects of the community and the history as well, and those are quite dark in many ways, but there's also a lot of light and joy to it, which you show. When you're finding that balance between, a comedic action heist film, was that a difficult thing to find that balance, I suppose, along with Philip Roberts? Was that a difficult balance to achieve? Yes,
it was very difficult to achieve, because you don't want to look. I'm saying all these things too, but it's very obvious that I'm an old white guy. So I don't know how many more years I would have to actually make this film about this community. And my dream is that the people from the community will one day be making films about this community. So, but to answer your question, I was always very aware of not overstepping the boundaries as a filmmaker, mm-hmm. being true to the community, not making the community feel like, okay, there's this white guy just arrived and he's appropriating our culture gains and he's not respecting the culture. So it was a real, it was a touchy thing. We knew that we had to embrace it and we had to pull it off. I hope it has been pulled off. Well, one of the ways that we got the go-ahead from the K community was that it's a Muslim and a Christian community, but I think probably more predominantly Muslim. And they had a committee that read the script. We wanted to involve them and ask for their permission if we were not overstepping in any way on the culture. And so we gave them the script. They read the script, and we made a couple of changes based on what they said. So we were very respectful of that. And it's a tough thing to balance. It's a tricky thing. I hope we've pulled it off.
I mean, there's a lot of comedy in it, and I laughed many times in it. And then, but like I said, like I dove deep, like headfirst into so much of the culture that I knew nothing about, and I just found it really fascinating to learn about that. So, what you said leads nicely into something I wanted to talk about, which is here in North America, and I'm sure you're very aware of it, when we talk about things like, cultural appropriation and authentic representations and diverse representations, it's quite a hot topic these days in the film industry in Hollywood. And it can be a real minefield for people outside of the community wanting to make a film about that community. And not that it can't be done, it obviously can be, but these days there's a lot of societal and almost political considerations that need to be made. Is it the same in South Africa? I mean, it sounds similar, that it is very similar in South Africa, and probably even more so given the history with race in the country. But I was just wondering, like, kind of looking from the outside in at America and how that film industry is forming right now, do you find you guys are a bit more sensitive, or are you more relaxed almost about it because of all of the kind of the more recently dark history versus America, where their history is, I don't want to say it's not recent, but it's not as recent, say, as apartheid?
Yeah, it's a topic that everyone's talking about around the world, and it's difficult because I live in Africa and I want to continue to make films about Africa, so it's also tricky because it should be people should be making films that are based in that community. That's what it should be. But I also think to some degree that it shouldn't stop people from making films from as an outsider's perspective, because I think as a film, that's quite an interesting thing to be objective about a community. Sometimes you can be subjective and you might not get the truths of the film. So it's like, my thing is to promote Black filmmakers, that they are making the films about their stories, but I also think that it shouldn't stop other people from the outside making films about that community. And I know in America it's a huge topic. As long as it's done in a way, it's about the tone and it's about the respect for the community and what you're trying to say. So I think those things are huge considerations. That the way you tell that story, are you being respectful? Mindful of what you're trying to get out of this community by the film that you're making? Are you including the people in that film? So I think,
So for yourself, you're saying you were an outsider to the Cape Malay community yourself. So how did you ingratiate yourself into there? And I mean, beyond just doing what I did, which was like read a Wikipedia page, which is, whatever. It's a good starting point, but I would assume you would have done more. So what did you do for this film, and in terms of getting that respect and learning more about the community?
So from the get-go, we insisted on all the HODs being Black HODs, and predominantly from the Cape Malay community. So my production designer, Samaya Wickham, she's fantastic. She's Cape Malay. Marcy Trout, who's our AD, he's Cape Malay. Mateo is our cinematographer, he's Black. We brought all, and then all of the and all the people as much as we could. I would say about 80% of our cast and crew, or all the cast, are from that community, and then all the crew made up from that community. So that was the first thing, and that happened even 10 years ago, that we included everybody to make it feel like everyone had a say from the community. Most of my films are with Black cast and crew, so it's been something that I've always done from day one.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a bit about Bunny Chow at the beginning, and it's kind of crazy to me to think 2006 is 16 years ago now. It's a bit much, but I mean, it's a long time. So over the 16 years for you as a filmmaker in South Africa, what have you seen the changes in terms of, you know, what directors are getting a shot now, what stories are being told, what's the audience's appetite? Like, how has that changed over from 2006 to 2022?
Yeah, it's been huge. I mean, I think when we made Bunny Chow, there was only 3 South African films made at the time. We went through a bit of a slump. I mean, we made more films leading up to that, but that was a particularly bad year. And I think the industry was very white dominated, old white male dominated, and I think that the films, there were some very good films that challenged the status quo, but I think this part was probably all from a white perspective. And I think what the streamers have done, it's now creating so many opportunities for female and for Black filmmakers that, you know, we have like filmmakers who a few years ago hadn't made a film are now on their 2nd or 3rd film. And so the industry it's fantastic. I just hope we maintain it. And I think we need a couple of success stories. Otherwise, you know, I suppose that the streamers are going to go, well, this is not really working for us. We're not getting anything back for all the money we're putting into it. We have to, all the filmmakers are aware that we do need success on some level. And I think the viewership is very good. So I think it's justified already, the money they're putting in. I think throughout Africa, like if you look at Queen Sono, who's made by my friend Kagiso, is in a lot of my films. I think Kagiso is moving on to another big show at the moment. So it's great because filmmakers are actually employed and are doing well. So that the industry is changed completely. It was a handful of a few filmmakers who had control of the industry. It's now blown up completely to where everyone's getting an opportunity. We just got to keep making good content.
One thing, I spoke with a couple South African directors last year during the film festival circuit, and they both mentioned how there seems to be a bit of a boom in South Africa now for genre filmmaking. So action, sci-fi, horror, those things. And I was interested in that because there was a movie I saw called Fried Berry, which is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life, but it was really interesting. They were saying it was a great thing that now that genre filmmaking was kind of experiencing a bit of a boom in the country because of a younger generation coming up who doesn't just want to tell stories that are, you know, about apartheid necessarily, like a dramatic story about apartheid. And they're saying that there's a bit of freedom now in the film industry to create different things. And I feel like your film is one of those that is a great pull from, it's not about apartheid, but it is about, you know, a lot of things that bled into apartheid in many ways, but yet is a genre film in its own way. Like you have the comedy, you have the action. And I think that that's such a wonderful thing, and it must be such an exciting bit, especially for yourself. I'm not calling you old. I actually was very surprised when I saw your picture. I thought, how did he make a film in 2006? But to be someone who was around since the beginning, to see it, it must be quite satisfying to see the film industry kind of branch out apart from just drama and doing so many different things now.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, when the industry starts like this, people make films, broad films about apartheid and those kind of themes. And so what's happening now is, what is so cool is that the stories are becoming smaller, intimate, and more about authenticity, about a smaller community. And so we're seeing that people are, we have so many different languages in this country. And so few of those that actually had any films made about themselves, but we're now starting to see that there's a small about a bunch of fishermen on the west coast of South Africa, and that's a film that's been made.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find that filmmakers are not afraid to go, well, it's not a broad strokes about apartheid. It's actually just about my relationship between myself and my mother growing up in the fishing village on the west coast of South Africa, and I'm telling that film. That film is now being seen on Netflix and on Amazon. It's being seen around the world. So yeah, that's changed, and that's what's so cool.
That's amazing.
That's definitely, yeah.
I think that's great, and it's you don't escape apartheid, you don't ignore it, because obviously you can't. It's such a part of the fabric, and because it is so recent, it is still very much a fact. I don't need to tell you this, but like to me, it's one of those things that's interesting that you can tell other stories but still keep that aspect. It's not like you're just shunning it away and saying this never happened. So I find that fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you go so that you can have a bit of a break between me and the next person. But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you. And I loved watching the film as well. It was great. Thanks again to John Barker for taking the time to speak with me. And if you're at the festival looking for something a little less heavy, because I know TIFF movies can generally be they're very emotional and they're very heavy and they're very dramatic. The Umbrella Men's a great one to check out. It's a fun comedy to watch, and I think it'd be a fun one to watch in theaters as well with the crowd. Alrighty, so that is me done for my first episode on my own, and hopefully that wasn't too rough, and Dakota, this wasn't too difficult to edit. Of course, if you want to follow me and more of my work, and it's all TIFF stuff at the moment, so you can check me out on rachelkh.com, and I'm on Twitter at _RachelKH. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. If you saw anything that you think myself, Dakota, anyone really, should be checking out at TIFF, send us an email at contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. Thanks for checking us out. Bye.